Hello and welcome to the Bucks podcast. I'm Anthony Deneau, along with Kyle McEwen and Terrell Leo Drevick. Terrell and I got things going back again last week, the week before. We are so glad to be reunited with our formerly Hawaiian friend Kyle McEwen.
Still wearing my Hawaiian t-shirts.
You got to. It's a part of you now.
It's my favorite breakfast place or a acai bowl place. It's called Waffle and Berry. If you go to Hawaii, it's down in Waikiki. It's ridiculous. You're gonna have to go get yourself an acai bowl and
Wait, which
learn
island is that?
how big your heart chakra can open. Oahu. It's one of these. Not the big one.
I heard they got the great surf over there.
Let's do that one.
That's great. It's one of these right here. Oh my goodness. Well, we had another Bucks victory. We're marching towards the playoffs. The Bucks have the number 1 seed, and even a 36-point victory on a Wednesday night is still a big deal because you're only coming into tonight's game, 2 games ahead of the Celtics for first place in the NBA, and more importantly, first place in the Eastern Conference. Bucks, of course, would love to have home court advantage throughout the playoffs. That is something that they are on track to have. Terrell, it was a pretty close game really until the last 2 minutes of the second quarter when the Bucks turned a 2-point lead into like a 15-point lead in the matter of moments, and really the route was on for the entire second half after that.
Yeah, these games, I tell you, with the Spurs, they have 19 wins coming into tonight overall, 9 wins on the road. It's like, okay, well, let's be more risky. Let's be more unorthodox. Let's try new things here and there. But at some point, let's put our foot on the pedal here and let's start going. I mean, you're talking about it was a 5-point game, and all of a sudden, a couple threes here and there, and next thing you know, it's a 15-point lead at halftime. And I think that's what was the turning point was Joe Ingles hitting a 3-pointer close to the end of the second half. Giannis, he really didn't need to play the second half. He's putting up video game numbers. Even tonight, he played 24 minutes with 14 rebounds. That's insane. But these games are, they're tough. Like, you don't want it to make it to game, you don't want it to make it a game. But what can you do? I mean, right? It's
Well, it's kind of a weird balance. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I mean, it's like Terrell was saying, the first half of the game, you're sitting there watching the Spurs and the Bucks, and the Spurs are turning the ball over a whole bunch, and you're thinking, why is this a close game? It shouldn't be a close game, right? The Bucks are obviously much better than these guys. The Spurs they're not only tanking, but they're resting their guys, like half their team every other game. So then you're getting a disjointed group that you're playing against, and that makes you feel like the Bucks should just be stomping on these guys. And that's why we were talking through DMs, like saying in the third quarter they have to really step up and run these guys down and make the game done by the fourth quarter. And that's pretty much what we saw happen. But I didn't expect it, as we're sitting there talking about it with like 3 minutes left in the second quarter, for the Bucks to just go from being up like 4 points to being up 16 going into the half. And you felt, I mean, right there, you were just like, okay, that's what the good teams do. That's what the championship teams do. When they decide they're done messing around, it's game over. We're going to bury you quick. And then if we don't want to play our guys late, we're not going to. And that's what we saw with this Bucks game against the Spurs team that, again, was resting a bunch of their regulars and then having like a disjointed group out there trying to manifest playmaking. And in the first half, they weren't doing it. In the second half, at least they didn't turn the ball over. But this team on the Spurs side still lacked any kind of playmaking to make them a real contender against the Bucks tonight.
No, it's a big deal. It's you want to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, and you want to probably have closer games against teams that you might face in the playoffs. It's still good to see somewhat of a competitive game for a little bit, just so the Bucks weren't, if you see them demolish a team right away, you're not really seeing how they fare in close games. And you want them to be prepared for stuff like that when the playoffs come. This is also, so it's a Spurs team coming off a back-to-back. Not everybody was playing. They're one of the worst teams in the NBA, regardless. But they did beat the Spurs beat the Bucks earlier in the season in San Antonio, 111-93. I think we did a podcast after the game. It was, you know, within the first 3 weeks of the season, November 11th, it looks like. So this, this is a team. I remember all three of us being very impressed with Jeremy Sohan. They did a great job against him tonight. Zach Collins, someone who's now playing, he was injured at that time. He really hasn't played in almost like 3 years, really, since he was on the Blazers. But he's the starting center now for the Spurs. I really like what I've seen from him the last few weeks. He might be showing us the player that we thought he was coming out of Gonzaga, and maybe the Blazers gave up on him a little bit too soon because of the injury history. The Spurs, good young team. I don't think they're quite even fully healthy. I don't think they're like what we're seeing out of OKC, where they are like pretty much a force to be reckoned with in the next year or two, potentially. Spurs are a few years away still, but it's good to see the Bucks beat who you're supposed to beat somewhat handily. And I think that's what we got tonight, and that's really what we wanted to see. Anything stood out to you guys other than a wonderful Jeremy Sohan's hair? His one-handed free throws, perhaps. Because I wanted to maybe get into some playoff rotation talk, since this wasn't that much of a game with a 36-point victory.
Okay, I can get into that. So before the game started, I believe the announcers, Lisa and Marcus, they announced that the starting lineups tonight were a 7-2 record for tonight's starting lineups. And I was thinking to myself, but this is the playoff starting lineup, isn't it? Is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking Giannis, we're talking Brooke, we're talking Chris Middleton, Drew. Everybody's healthy here. This is going to be the playoff starting lineup, and they've only played 9 games together as starters. I get in practice here and there. They practice here off and on, but they looked really, really good tonight. I thought. I don't know. They took some chances here and there, but maybe could have been. I thought it was tonight a B+ effort from the playoff starters.
The fact, I mean, we know why there's only been 9 games with these guys together so far this season, and that's because Chris Middleton was either out for a lot of the season or coming off the bench when he first got back for a long time. So that's why it's the reintegration of Middleton into the starting lineup, but again, that's not really that big of a thing, right? With this team, because of the fact that they have years of playing together with, and then Grayson Allen even starting on the team last year, I believe, all season too. So it's just, I guess I'm not like, it's shocking to see that number and to be like, oh crap, they've only started this team or this lineup 9 times, but it doesn't make me feel worried about their meshing together going forward, I guess, or being in the playoffs, starting off with this group. And beyond that, something that I know you want us to talk about, Anthony, in regards to the playoff rotation. For me, what stands out to this team is like there's so many guys to choose from, and that's kind of what you pointed out when we were starting this conversation in our DMs, just listing the sheer number of guys that you would be comfortable with in this rotation or out there on the floor at almost any given time, and then the versatility of being able to play big, play small, but still play with a lot of big, tall guys at matchup positions and things like that as well. So it's just exciting to even start to think about the possibilities of this team in their versatility and flexibility as a roster due to their depth.
Most NBA playoff teams will shrink down to maybe 3 or 4 guys off the bench. And this Bucks team, I think, has 6 guys that will see time, depending on matchups, depending on series. For me personally, of these 6 guys, so you think off the bench, you've got Bobby Portis as their 6th man. Jay Crowder's going to get a ton of playoff minutes. We've talked about him a ton, right? Javon Carter, he's their backup point guard. He's now the guy with, George Hill gone, and we haven't even seen Dragic yet. And I'm not even including Dragic in this, which is also very interesting. Then you go Joe Ingles at the 4th guy coming off the bench. Me personally, fully healthy team, I'll take Wes Matthews as that next guy, defensive purposes, over Pat Connaughton, who would be the 11th spot. or the basically the sixth guy coming off the bench, and Coach Bud is not going to keep Pat Connaughton off the floor, and especially in high leverage situations, we've seen it before. Sometimes to my personal dismay and other fans as well. But to me, I think Pat Connaughton is like number 11 on the team and number 6 coming off the bench if I were to rank a fully healthy Bucks team. What do you guys think about that, Terrell? I know you have some ideas of what you'd like to see maybe in crunch time, maybe see more Grayson than you see a Jay Crowder perhaps.
Right. You're talking about at the first half, you want to bring the flash a little bit, and that is you want to bring the scoring, the 3-point shot, and that is going to be Grayson Allen. I know you mentioned Jay Crowder over Grayson Allen, possibly in the starting lineups, especially for the playoffs. I just don't see it happening. I mean, Grayson Allen, great season this season so far. 3-point shooting has been, well, let's put it, phenomenal with the capital P. So I don't see Grayson Allen leading the starting lineup with that starting 5 that was tonight. Now we're talking about reserves. Bobby Portis for sure. Jay Crowder for defensive purposes. Right. And next, to replace Grayson Allen, if he's not on, if he's not hot or whatever, I think it's gonna be Patty C. I really do think that if Grayson Allen has a cold shooting streak, that maybe one playoff game, maybe 2 in a series, that Patty C gets a start here and there. If he has a good shooting night, I just see it happening like that. Like you can pick guys and just pluck them into the starting lamps. That makes a team so dangerous. This team is so scary to watch, especially with, like, you talk about Drew Holiday. He slows the game down from a point guard position. If you want to speed it up, well, you have Javon Crowder right there on the bench. Plug him right in. He'll give you pace. He'll give you tempo. Whatever you want to do. This whole team, they can adjust whatever way they want. It's so dangerous. I'm so pumped for the playoffs. Kyle, hit me with it.
I mean, it's like you were just rattling off. There's so many options, but Ingles is going to be a big part of this rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a start at some point over Grayson Allen. It's tough because you're sitting there and you're trying to hem and haw over whether or not to put like a guy like Bobby Portis into a bigger role. And then you start saying, well, then do you have to play Brook Lopez less? And you don't. You can play Bobby Portis in there, and you can play super big with Giannis and Chris at shooting guard and small forward. Like you can even do the Giannis at point guard lineup where you've got Chris Middleton, Jay Crowder, Bobby Portis, and Brook Lopez out there, or Jay Crowder for crying, like it's just, or Joe Ingles if I didn't mention him. Like there's so many options where you can go out there and really put your thumb on another team who has no chance of matching up with your size and skill combo.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think of a deeper team in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference or really in the NBA right now. If everyone on every team was fully healthy, I just don't see anyone beating a fully healthy Milwaukee Bucks.
Is this roster better than their championship roster?
I would say yes. Okay, Terrell, they're much deeper, I would say. Terrell, would you agree?
I think based on the pieces, I think yes. I think
just on paper. We're just saying on paper, right? Like right now.
I mean, based on paper, yes. This is a better roster than what they have for the championship team. That championship team, though, they got hot and they stayed hot. This team, if they catch fire, we don't know what it's going to be like yet.
There's so many different interesting things. So in the championship year, first round, Dante DiVincenzo was your starting shooting guard. He gets hurt. Then it's PJ Tucker who eventually becomes that starter, kind of moving Chris Middleton down to shooting guard, and PJ Tucker becomes a starter. So the Tucker-Crowder combination, or those comparisons, keeping Crowder off the bench, I think makes sense, as you were talking about, keeping Grayson as the starting 2. Pat Connaughton, obviously more positional versatility, can guard more, not a great defender, but solid, and can guard and play more more positions, but you're getting, a little bit more rebounding out of him. But Grayson and Pat, very similar players. You're going to get the corner shots from them. You're going to get even solid screen setting and hustle plays. It was Bryn Forbes in that first round series who outscored Jimmy Butler. Then in the third round, the Eastern Conference Finals, to make it to the finals, it was Jeff Teague with a huge game against his former team, the Hawks. I mean, you think about how much better they are now, where, Bryn Forbes by the end of the playoffs was out of the rotation. Bobby Portis was not in the rotation for the Brooklyn Nets series. And then you had someone like Jeff Teague who played a really important role against the Hawks. And now I think all those positions are upgraded. I mean, I would take PJ Tucker's defense over Jay Crowder, not by that much though. Offensively though, Crowder is a better player, and I think he's a better rebounder. Tons of experience. He's been in the finals for the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. I think that you have Javon Carter, who is a better backup point guard than we had with Jeff Teague during that season. Plus the ball handling of really Joe Ingles is more of a backup point guard than Javon is. Javon is like kind of spearheading the defense and a really good jump shooter transition player. But in terms of slow down running the offense, Joe Ingles is sort of that guy off the bench. However you want to slice it, that team didn't have Wes Matthews. He was on the Bucks before and then signed after the finals. However you want to slice it, I think this Bucks team is more deep.
Who do you got? Okay, so like a guy like Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton, they can hit shots, but I don't trust them to hit big shots really.
Sure.
Whereas Joe Ingles, I expect the shot to go in, even in big moments.
Absolutely. No, I love that. He's one of those guys I would expect to see, in late, close, fourth quarter, crunch time playoff games. Maybe you do a defensive switch where you bring in Crowder on the defensive end. If it's one of those where you're able to make subs on the fly. Maybe you bring in Brook on defense and then you have Ingles on offense, or there's so many different ways that you can kind of slice this. My worry is that I love Coach Bud. He brought the Bucks their first championship in my lifetime, but sometimes I worry that he gets in the way of things and that I would see Pat or Grayson too much at the end of a game. Yeah. And so far it's been a little bit frustrating. I know Jay Crowder hasn't played at all this season until he, joined the Bucks about a month ago, 5 weeks, whatever. And he's still getting his legs out under him. But seeing Pat Connaughton in there at times when I feel like Jay Crowder should be out there, especially for defense and getting into the groove with the, those top four guys, your Giannis, your Chris, your Drew, and your Brook, that it hurts my stomach a little bit when I see Pat out there with those guys and not Jay Crowder or even Joe Ingles, because like you said, Kyle, when Joe Ingles has the ball and I'm like, oh yeah, he's making the shot. And he was shooting like 60% the last 2 to 3 weeks or something insane. Like his March numbers, if you look for Joe Ingles, are just out of this world. And my biggest issue right now is Chris Middleton's defense has been really awful. His offense is good. I think the numbers are shooting back up since he's gotten the starting lineup, and the percentages are on the way up. His assists have been awesome. His passing looks great. Sometimes a few turnovers that are questionable, but I think he's working his way out of that. But especially in the Raptors game, there's times when Chris Middleton looks pretty bad on defense. I don't know if it's like they told him, hey, maybe take it easy on this side, or we can cover you for now, or what the case is, but slightly concerned about that at the moment. Terrell, have you seen any bit of that makes you worry a little bit about Chris?
Yeah, maybe it's being conservative coming back from an injury, but I just think about this. The random starting lineups from October, November, December to what we have now, and the Bucks, they have over 50 wins this season. That's insane to think about. And they have had, I don't know, 20, 21, 22, 23 different starting lineups tonight or this season. Like that's crazy to think about.
Well, okay. Chris, Joe, and Jay Crowder. Those three didn't really play at all until some of them didn't play until Christmas Day or later. Chris got a couple games in there, but didn't really get with the team until January 23rd or something like that. Jay Crowder was a trade deadline acquisition. Joe Ingles wasn't able to play until I think Christmas Day. So all these guys who have played with each other and played big minutes, Javon Carter getting a number of starts at the beginning of the season. Giannis has missed close to 15 games, something like that. A lot of guys have played important. Like Bobby Portis has gotten a number of starts when Giannis is out. Like a lot of these guys have played. They've gotten good experience with some of the other starters because of the situation that they've been in, and it says a lot about the team. And kind of their testament is because they're number one in the league. They have more wins than anybody else, regardless of all the injuries and who's missed games and who's played with who and what the combinations are, who's coming off the bench. I mean, it's pretty wild.
I think the Bucks can win the championship as long as they've got Giannis and Chris healthy. And I know that you were just criticizing Chris's defense, but it's just the fact that he's out there on offense and able to hit those big shots late and things like that, to be another facilitator with his size and things, and from the forward position. And if Middleton's defense really does need to pick up, at least he's got the mentality that's generally his speed is to play good defense. So if he's struggling there right now, then I would think it's something he's working on.
Yeah, and I would like to see how it progresses over the next couple of weeks, how he looks in the first round. Very interested to see what that first round matchup would look like. Still a chance the Bucks could drop to as far as a 3 seed, but hopefully not the case. Tough back-to-back road trip. Is it Friday, Saturday, where it is?
The Jazz and the Nuggets, I believe.
Nuggets on, I think it's Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday. But the next 4 games are on the road. The Bucks still have 3 back-to-backs and we only have 2 or 3 weeks left in the season. So kind of not a fun way to end the season with this little road trip and all the back-to-backs.
Yeah, and I mean 5 games in 7 days, they're going to rest their guys in at least one of these games. At least one of them.
It's the Western Conference. Like, what's at stake, right? You have a 2.5 game lead in the Eastern Conference. You drop 2 games. You still have a half game lead after playing the Jazz, after playing the Nuggets. What do you do?
Just as a fan, my preference is that they sit guys for the Jazz game and play them on the back-to-back for the Nuggets game, just to see how those healthy teams match up. The Nuggets might be coming off a back-to-back on that as well, so I could see that being the game that a bunch of guys sit. Sad, maybe even Jokic too, which sucks because you'd like to see 2 of the top 3 MVP major candidates right now. Then you throw Embiid in there. But that might not be the case. What do you think, Kyle?
I hate resting, period. But if you're going to do it, you want to, from my perspective, you want to still try to compete in both games. Mm-hmm. So you rest like Giannis and maybe one of your other core guys for that Utah game, and maybe even 3 of them, but you don't rest all of them.
Right.
So that then you're still not giving up a potential win in this Utah game that should be a lock almost. And then the Denver game should be a loss. The second night of a back-to-back on the road, generally going to
in
lose
Denver,
those
and that's always tough.
Exactly. In Denver, the altitude, people say that's always an issue.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the way I would like to see it handled. Yeah.
I'm glad that the Bucks this season, we haven't seen that where they totally punt against a team and sit all 5 starters, something we have seen in the Coach Bud era, where you would completely see a totally different lineup. You'd have 4 or 5 starters, or maybe Brook would play, but everyone else would be main bench rotation. I think the Bucks are also deep enough to kind of withstand that. We saw Wes Matthews back tonight. We don't know when we're going to see Dragic, Myers, Leonard as well. Like, I think the Bucks are deeper to handle those situations, but I'm glad that Coach Bud is not doing that where he is kind of just punting and going full on sit everybody at one game. And he has been breaking it up more in those back-to-backs. So we know Chris is going to sit one of the two. Giannis will probably sit one of the two. But I like what you said, Kyle. I think they should alternate those two. I see Brook playing both games just because that's kind of his mentality is always to play. And Friday night, the big thing about seeing the Jazz play would be to see Walker Kessler on one side and Brook Lopez on the other and see if we can get a combined, 15 blocks between the two.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm kind of excited about that possibility. Do you guys see the Bucks holding on to the 1 seed? I know this is kind of a rough road trip and a few back-to-backs in the season, but I certainly hope they can, fend off the Celtics for the number 1 spot.
Grayson Allen said they are like, they're not necessarily talking about it like as a team where they're like, we have to get the 1 seed, but he says they talk about it and that it's something
the
that
players want it.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Because last, 2 years ago, the championship year, they wanted to face the Heat, so they did what they could to make sure they faced the Heat in the first round, who had eliminated them in the bubble. And then last year, they kind of punted a game that ended up giving the Celtics, they were tied, I think, in record, but the Celtics had the tiebreaker. And then, of course, Game 7 against the Celtics was in Boston last year because of that. So I think they have that on their mind, too, of like, this time, the 1 seed is right there for us. Let's go get it.
Look, teams who take their foot off the gas don't win the damn championship, okay? They don't.
You want to be hot.
Yeah. You got to be playing your guys together big minutes so that they have consistency and stuff like that. So I'm loving it, and I hope that the Bucks keep it up. And if they don't rest their guys at all over the next five games in 7 days, I'm all for it. Except I'm not really. That would just kind of be stupid. But then again, you know what? When you have a situation like this where both of these back-to-backs are against kind of subpar teams and then really good teams. So play against the damn subpar team, beat the crap out of them in the first 3 quarters so that you're not playing your guys big minutes and they're essentially getting half a game off, And they're not playing those crazy fourth quarter minutes where you're trying to will the game into a win. So that would be my preference is to have a roster filled with a bunch of guys who also are like actually in love with playing basketball and can't stand the idea of watching their own team go out there and lose because they got told they needed to rest tonight, which is like, that's something that I know there's some players out there who probably do put up a huge fight when they should be when their team wants to rest them more. And they're like, are you kidding me? I'm fine.
Right.
I'm playing. I'm healthy. I'm breathing. I can walk. I'm good.
No, I love that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to make fun of myself for saying I'm good. I'm like 5 different ways.
Totally agree, Kyle. We're talking about barriers here. You can only create barriers, but then, I don't know, you blow out a team and your players don't play, or you create barriers when you have a 2.5, 3 game lead over the entire Eastern Conference and you don't need to play players. Next thing you know, your chemistry is ruined. It's like, well, shucks, we should be punished for winning games. And it's like, well, we don't want players to get hurt, but we do want to go far in the playoffs too. And really,
injuries are just part of the game. Like it happens. You don't know when they're going to happen. So some of this dancing around the possibility of an injury crap that teams do, it's exhausting as a fan.
All right. Well, I feel like now I want to know some personal stuff. Kyle, you have left Hawaii and you are now back in Michigan.
Yeah. Yep. I was in Hawaii for 5 months and now I'm back in Michigan and it's colder here, but it's crazy. We did like this equinox fire the other night, me and some buddies. And the next day you wake up and it's like, it's supposed to be spring. We just did a ritual to welcome in spring and it's warmer. And you're seeing like flowers.
You feel like you had something to do with that.
Stuff like that. I think
is that like the Burning Man of Michigan?
It was the Burning Man of Muskegon. Actually, Fruitport area. We went out to our buddy Bill's little piece of land, and my buddy Ron he'd spent weeks building this fire, dude. It was crazy. We had a bunch around. It was a lot of fun.
I tell you, that side of Michigan with the Silver Lake sand dunes, if you could just get a go-kart or some kind of dune buggy, ooh, baby, that's a lot of fun.
Kyle, you
hiking the
searching for
dunes
gold?
yesterday? Huh?
Kyle, you gonna be out looking for gold?
Where'd you hear that? Did I tell you that?
I watched a little bit of History Channel, checking out my the cousins of Oak Island, basically.
Oh, that's so funny, dude. That's kind of crazy that you asked that. No, there's a bunch of stories about like gold in Muskegon. Our founding father, Charles Hackley, supposedly got his fortune and started the lumber mill here, all because he stole a bunch of Confederate gold. And then there's these other stories about how there's a bunch of gold getting transported across Lake Michigan and it's still lost at the bottom of the sea. And it's like, if you stole a bunch of gold and you had to transport it on a boat across the lake, what would you be telling people? Oh, man, that's at the bottom of the lake, buddy. Sorry, the boat caught on fire.
That's very comparable to the city of Wazoo, Wisconsin. In Wausau, Wisconsin, they have this place called Rim Mountain, Granite Peak, and they started drilling or started digging on the backside of the mountain. And they started finding some gold, and they're like, "Oh, let's get a whole expedition going. We struck gold. Come on!" And next thing you know, there was no gold. What happened? The guys started peppering flakes of gold into the side of the hill, saying, "Oh, I see it. I see some gold. I see some gold. Let's keep the expedition going." Obviously, the guy ran out of money and he needed funding from the city, and they never gave it to him. But oops.
Oh goodness. I love you guys.
Wait,
Great to
I
have.
gotta write this idea down.
There you go.
Gold
Yeah.
scam 101.
Flakes of gold peppered.
I'm not wasting my flakes of gold. I'm gonna get that fake gold, that pyrite.
There you go.
Trick 'em.
Fool's gold. All right, fellas. Thanks for joining. We'll get back together hopefully within a week, and then especially once the Bucks hit the playoffs, it's game on. So thank you all for joining us. I'm Anthony. He is Kyle, and he over there is Terrell. And we will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Love you.